Hi, Bill here with 30-Minute Woodshop. Thanks for joining today. I'm going to be showing you how to build this small pencil box with this cargo container motif. It's a pretty slick little piece, easy to open. It's 9 inches long, 2 1/4 high, and 4 inches wide. It uses the stock 1/4 inch material directly from a big box store. When you do buy this, make sure you check it for straightness, parallel, and cupping. The straighter, more parallel, and less cup you have, the easier this project's going to be. By using stock material, it makes things a whole heck of a lot easier in terms of not having to prep the surfaces and prep the wood. It also reduces the amount of sanding, and it makes the project go a lot faster. Our objective is to create a project, not to do a lot of sanding. So, let's talk about the tools we're going to need. Pretty much going to use the same kind of tools we used in the last couple projects. You're going to need a saw of some kind. This is my old Nicholson bench saw that I use pretty frequently. For this project, however, I'm going to be using a table saw and a radial arm saw. Those are the most efficient for me. I like to do things quick and easy. Oop. So, you're going to need to have some kind of a square. This happens to be an adjustable square. I would recommend a Starrett if you can afford one. If not, you can get one from I think from Peck or iGauge. They're pretty inexpensive. Some type of pencil. You notice my pencil is magnetically attached. Guys, I suggest you do that. You never lose your pencils that way. I have a blog on that, and also a YouTube video. Some way to measure. You could use the adjustable square, but to be frank, it's kind of a pain in the butt to use that. These are much easier, kind of yo-yo. This one happens to be a DeWalt 16. You can get away with a 6-footer. We're not measuring that far. You're going to need a finish of some kind. I'm going to use this Boiled Linseed Oil from Clean Strip. This actually is pretty good. It's easy to put on. Wipe it out with a paper towel, wipe it off, let it dry a little while. Really good. We're going to need a couple other tools that we're adding to this. We're adding a card scraper. I have a video on this. Take a look at it. It shows you how to sharpen it and gives you a real quick demo on how to use it. If you don't have one in your tool set, guys, this is a problem solver. You get all kinds of things like burns from your saw blades. You get things like saw marks. This thing will take it off in no time at all. We're also adding a record. This happens to be a record. We're adding a block plane. So this block plane is pretty easy, pretty small. If you're going to buy a block plane, these cost about $30 at the low end. I think a Wood River is about $140, and then you can obviously go up from there with some really high-end equipment. But no matter what you buy, before you use it, take it out of the box, open it up, and sharpen the blade. The only ones that you don't have to sharpen the blade on are some of the really high-end ones that already come pre-sharpened. Everything else has to have a sharpened blade. So otherwise what happens is you'll use this, you'll be horribly disappointed in its performance, you'll put it aside and never use it again. So sharpen the blade. Oh, got duct safety. So I'm using power tools. If you're using power tools, be sure you wear safety glasses and be sure you wear hearing protection. I was in artillery. I have some hearing problems already. I don't need to make it worse. You guys, I'd like to hope that you don't have those problems. You can keep your hearing well into old age. Wear your hearing protection, wear your eye protection. It only takes one accident. So let's move on to materials. So if you remember, we talked about how big the box is. It's 9 inches long, right? 2 1/4 inches high and 4 inches wide. Here's the prototype. You can see we're going to be using butt joints around here, and you can see how the bottom fits. The sides are butted to the bottom, and the end is butted in. So the sides butt into the end, and the end butts right to the bottom. So I need 2 pieces, a top and a bottom, that are 3 1/2 inches wide, full width. I need 2 more pieces that are 2 1/4 inch wide to the sides. Then I'm going to need a little bit more for these end pieces that are 2 1/4 inch wide, except they're a little less than 2 1/4. They're actually 2 inches. Because if you see this butt joint down here, so from top to top here, top of the butt joint of the bottom, the top, is 2 inches. I have to take out that 1/4 inch piece there. We don't have to worry about that because we're actually going to mark it and cut it without having to measure it. I'll show you how to do that. Pretty straightforward. So a couple things, guys. Don't sit there and gang your measurements, meaning mark it at 9, mark it at 18, and so on and so forth. If you do that and then go cut it, you're going to be 1/8 of an inch off on every single piece. Actually, a little more than 1/8 of an inch by the time you get to the end. So you measure your first piece and then use that as a pattern to measure the rest of your pieces. So we're going to cut all these to length, and I'm going to actually leave an extra 1/8 of an inch on these pieces just to give me a little slop. And then what I'm going to do, then I'm going to take the 2 pieces that, for my size, I'm going to strip them off to the right thickness. And I should have one more piece left over for the ends, and I can strip that off. By the way, save the pieces that you cut off because they're going to be these elements here that would make it a cargo style box, cargo style crate. Okay, let's head over to the table saw. So if you remember, we need a top and a bottom that are full width. We'll set those aside, and we're going to have to cut 2 pieces at 2 1/4. First thing I want to do, lift the blade so there's 3 teeth hanging out. 3 teeth out pretty much does nothing more than keep me from being injured too badly if I get my hand caught in the blade. I keep my hands away from the blade. Set the fence, 2 1/4. Lock it in. Make sure you always use a push block. We'll strip these off. Sorry for the noise. Now I have my top, bottom, and sides. Do a real quick look here, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So we're already making progress. We're going to save these pieces because these pieces are going to end up being the cargo container strapping. So don't lose them. One more thing we have to do is we got to trim off a piece for the ends. So this is the remainder. We're going to trim it off actually at 2. So 2 inches. The reason we're doing that is because it takes into account the bottom. So you see we're putting the bottom together on the sides. So take that off. Now, just so you know, I left that tag on here, so I knew this was the piece I was using for my sides, and I didn't take one of my other pieces and chop it up. Back with a saw. And I have one spare piece in case I need it. So everything's cut. Next step is to sand. On a project like this, always sand before you assemble. Small projects are a pain in the butt to sand, especially on the inside. This happens to be a no slip or a low slip pad. It's kind of used so it slips around a little bit, but super easy to, as I said before, these are already machined surfaces. So while they're not super smooth, it doesn't take a lot to make them smooth. All you're going to do is hit it with 220. A little bit of pressure, and that thing smooths right out. So I'm going to do all these parts. It'll take about 5 minutes to do, but there's no point in having a video record of that, so I'll catch up to you in a second. Our sanding is done. Now we're going to move on to glue up. In gluing this up, a couple things to be aware of. First of all, look at your pieces and see if there's any grain pattern particularly you like and you want on the outside or even the inside. Check for things like tear out. This piece right here has a little bit of tear out, and so does this one, so I want those on the inside where it's less visible. Things like cupping. If this particular piece cupped, and actually it does, I want the cup up, or down actually. So I want the cup down, so it's cupped down, so that whenever it's sitting on something, it's sitting on the edges of the cup. If I do it the other way with the cup up, the cup will end up allowing the piece to sit there and rock. That's not very good. So, bottom check, make sure the cup's down, make sure your pieces are set up so that if there's any tear out or anything you want to hide, they go inside, and make sure you've got your pieces laid out. We're going to throw glue along these edges, and then along here, these edges and these edges. So when I put this together, pieces go on top here, these pieces go on the side, and then of course these go inside. Let's get to that. This doesn't take a lot of glue, so don't overdo it on the glue. You never want glue-starved joints, but you also don't want it swimming in glue if you can help it. That just creates more problems in the end. I'd also tell you to make sure you have some water and paper towel handy, because this is water soluble until it's dry. Then you're in trouble. So we got these pieces. Remember, this is you're only a 1/4 inch, so you got to keep it pretty close to the edge. All right, everything's glued. Let's stand the pieces up. Your fingertips can feel about 3/1000ths of an inch or less, depending on what the surface is. So it's pretty easy for you to tell whether or not you've got everything flush, flat, and aligned. And as you put the clamps on, one thing you're going to want to do is snug the clamps up, but not so tight that you warp anything. You just want them solidly snug. So your initial snugging gives you the opportunity to readjust things, make sure everything's aligned properly. Up on top. Again, you're only trying to just snug these up firmly. You're not trying to I pushed it right out. You're not trying to crush it. You don't want to try and crush all the glue out of the joint. The glue has to have enough space so it can remain and be absorbed into the wood. There we go. Make sure you go back and check for alignment and flushness. Flushness is key to this whole project. It'll save you a ton of sanding in the end. Once everything's lined up, give it a little extra twist. And there you have it. That's all it took. So, we're going to, next after this, we'll let this dry for a couple hours. It'll be nice and solid. Then what we'll do, we'll give it a quick sanding on the outside, and then we'll go into fitting the lid. Glue is dried. Let's pull off the clamps. Quick inspection of the box, and I did a pretty good job of making sure all the edges and ends were parallel and flush. But there is still some glue that popped out, so I'm going to use my card scraper. All right, I'm going to lock this into a tail vise, or wagon vise actually, and I'm going to use my card scraper to get rid of some of this excess glue that popped off. I don't know if you can see this in your in the video. We're pulling off really nice curls. We're pulling off all the excess glue. Beauty of this is that it saves me a lot of sanding. And unlike a plane, I can target the area that needs to be scraped. So here, once I've scraped this flush, you can't even see the joint. Okay. Card scraper. Great little tool. Now we'll go ahead and sand this real quick. How much you sand the ends is going to be dependent on how much you want the grain to pop. Grain will darken up the less you sand it. But you do want to make sure you get all the glue off. There are a couple little spots here where I can see where I slopped some glue. The other thing you want to do is you want to round the corners a little bit. You don't want sharp corners when you go to finishing, because the finish actually won't stick to a sharp corner. Don't have to be really rounded, just enough so that you can feel it. If you're measuring it, probably would be about a 32nd of an inch. Yep, even these are really nice and flush. So the box is pretty much ready to start fitting the So the box is ready to start fitting the lid. So this doesn't fit, the top doesn't fit either in width or length. But as you can see, or maybe you can't, this is only a few thousandths of an inch too big. Maybe 30 thou. Probably not even that. So what I'm going to do is use this block plane to trim the edge nice and tight, so when it fits, there won't be too much of a gap. So keep watching, and I'll get a close-up and show you how this is done. Like anything, I may be off by a little bit. In other words, the plane may dig too deeply in one side, not the other. And I'm really trying not to take too much. On the prototype, I got a little carried away, and there's a little more gap there than I would have liked. But you can see how quickly that happened, how that curls off. So you see my plane is sharp. And you'll do this 2 or 3 times until you get a nice fit. You don't really want it snug, you want it just loose. Oh, there we go, we're almost there. Just a little bit more. So you see how that gets sticky? You definitely don't want it sticky. And there we have it. Nice. Okay, now we got to cut it to length, and then we have to put on the window dressing, which are the side bands and top band. So keep watching, and we'll show you how to do that too. I've cut all the banding parts. As you can see, the cross pieces and the 4 verticals. So 2 cross pieces, 4 verticals, 2 on each side. This might give you a better view of the actual pieces I have. 2-face taped inside to hold up the top. As you can see, the top fits really nicely and it keeps it from falling in. This is going to be the method of opening. Now what we've got to do is we have to glue these on. Lots of ways to glue them, lots of different kinds of glue. I'm using a thick set CA glue. This is by Mercury Adhesives. You can get any kind you want. The thick set gap filling actually works a little better on porous open grain wood like oak. I'm also going to be using an activator. So this activator causes the glue to polymerize very quickly. It still not instantaneous, but it's pretty darn close. Once I set it using the activator, it's never moving again. A couple things you haven't seen. I did them before I turned the camera back on. Along here, I put a couple of registration marks, vertical lines in pencil, and put a little X on the inside. That gave me a 2-inch edge to line on each side. And that kind of gives me the aesthetic that I'm looking for in terms of a cargo box. So let's get started. One thing that you have to do is make sure, like before, if you have tear out or anything, you want to make sure the tear out is inside, outside, someplace where it's not as visible as other places. So we'll start this whole process off. You don't need a lot of this glue, by the way. You don't want it all over the place and making a mess. So I kind of hate to say use sparingly, but kind of use sparingly. You can see how much glue I put on that. Next thing I want to do is I want to hit this with activator. And I'll set the edge right on the line. Make sure the bottom is lined up exactly. Super critical to make sure the bottom is lined up. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation where, and it's also square. You want it square. So once this goes down, hold it for a couple seconds and it's bonded pretty well permanently. These go on pretty fast. Same kind of thing here. You just want to make sure that you pick the sides you don't want people to see and hide those as much as possible. One thing about woodworking, you're going to make mistakes. The trick to good woodworkers is they know how to hide their mistakes. And the longer you're at it, the more mistakes you make, the easier it gets. So line it up on the line, make sure it's even with the bottom. Square, drop it in place. Pinch it for a little bit. Now, bad thing for this one, too late. It's off by maybe 1/32 of an inch. I can see the line. So, one thing I don't want to do in the lid is I don't want to use activator. The reason I don't want to use activator is I have to have enough slop. It's got to slide around enough so that I can match this up this way and this way. So I'm going to have to be able to slide it around until I find the spot and then take my hands away, hands in the air, let it set. This glue takes a couple of minutes to set. Contrary to popular belief, it's not instantaneous. The other thing I do want to do is I want to mark on this piece where the glue is going to go. And I want that side up. And the reason I'm choosing this side up is because of grain. I like that particular little piece of grain pattern right there. It's the only reason. And all I'm doing is striking a light line here. And know I'm going to put the glue in between these two lines. And that kind of matches. So I'm looking to match. Oh, let's go this way. Okay, so this match. I definitely don't want to get glue into the crack and seal this whole thing up. That would be a total disaster. And again, I'm not killing this thing with glue. I don't want glue squirting out everywhere, especially on top. Using my thumbs to line this up. Dropping it in place. It'll slide around a little bit. It's exactly what I want. There we go. Now this glue is going to have to set up for a little bit before we carry on to our next phase. And quite frankly, the next phase is nothing more than doing the final finishing. And the final finishing is going to be fairly easy. We're going to wipe on some boiled linseed oil and call it good. So stick around. We'll come back in a little bit when this dries up and we'll hit it with some finish. Well, we've pulled out the supports inside. Everything's glued up. Let's give this thing a try. Looks good. Top fits pretty well. So I will say one thing. Top, normally these things, there we go. Normally these are 2 inches exactly. Because there's a little bit of difference on one side, this actually is now a handed top. If I turn it around, it's off by maybe 1/16 of an inch or less. so it looks a little odd. One reason to keep it exact, or as close as possible. This way it's perfect. It's easy to open. Now we have to go ahead and finish this. Lots of things to do as far as finishing. Let me grab my finishing board. Just a piece of cardboard to keep it off my top here. I would say this, guys, make sure a couple things, whatever finish you're using, if you're going to be hand applying it, I would definitely wear a glove or gloves. These things are ubiquitous now. You can get them anywhere. I'm going to probably have to find something to open this with. Oh, here we go. If I haven't said enough about these things, this is a Gerber. It's kind of a multi-tool with a X-Acto blade in it. It's really great to have an X-Acto blade in your pocket. And it also has a little pry feature, a cutting feature, bottle opener, and a couple different nail puller and a screwdriver. So all I'm going to do with this thing is just wipe on some varnish. Okay, technically it's not varnish, but boiled linseed oil. So one thing about doing anytime you wipe on a finish, pour a little in here. Make sure that you don't have any dry spots when you get done. And especially in the corners. It's real easy to, especially applying using a rag, it's easy to miss the corners. They're hard to get into sometimes. You can let it sit for a little bit and then wipe it off, or if you're like me, I just wipe it off. I'm not looking for a really heavy finish. Make sure you go over all the ends. The ends will absorb a lot more water, or not, sorry, I finish. They'll absorb water too. There you go. Let's give it a quick wipe down. So one thing I like about BLO is it really creates a nice color on the oak. I don't have to put any kind of a stain or anything on the wood. It brings the natural color of the wood out. And there we have it. Well, this finish is still a little tacky. But just to give you an idea, there's the finished product. It's going to have to dry for an hour. Actually, it's going to cure for about an hour or two. And then once it's cured, it's ready to go. So I'm going to leave it out here. And folks, that's the project. Well, thanks for sticking to the end and learning how to build a small pencil box. It's a pretty cool little project. If you have any questions, of course, put them down in the comments section, or you can go to my blog. There's a link. There'll be a link in the bottom, and you can go ahead and find out a little bit more about the dimensions and some of the things, the tools I use, those types of things. Additionally, there's links down there for some of the materials I've used, and those types of things. If you click on them, they are affiliate links, and I do get a small portion from Amazon if you use those links. I appreciate it because it helps support the channel. On that note, folks, again, thanks for joining, and until next time, good making.